Hello and welcome to another episode of A Slice of Health, the Candid Health Chat podcast, where we slice away health truth from health fiction. Join me and my friends as we challenge common health myths via chit chat, powered by several cups of coffee. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us on social media, and do visit us at asliceofhealth.club. Let's get to today's episode. On today's episode, I'm joined by my two friends, Dr. Jemima Ubaro and Dr. Timmy Oshin. We discuss race, gender, and working in healthcare. George Floyd's death in the past week, alongside the protests that have occurred worldwide, have brought to the fore the evidence and perpetual institutional racism that exists, that so many of us have to face, that affects both our patients and our colleagues working in healthcare. I do hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope it is the beginning of important conversations that we need to have. Hello champions, welcome back to another episode of A Slice of Health, and it's me, MGO. Today we are joined by Jemima and Timmy. Jemima is an O&G trainee in the Northwest. She's been a medic for 6 years, and outside of medicine, she has several interests, including music, event planning, and she's also started producing spoken word pieces which can be accessed via Instagram and YouTube. We are also joined today by Timmy Oshin, who is a British Nigerian doctor, born and raised in London. She obtained her medical degree in the Ukraine and is currently finishing her GP training in Southend. Welcome, Jemima and Timmy.
Thank you.
Hey, hi, thanks for having us.
Thanks for joining us today. So today we're talking about race in medicine, race as a woman in healthcare. And obviously it's on the backdrop of everything that has happened with the murder of George Floyd, and that then raising a lot of issues of institutional racism that exists in the UK. We often in the UK tend to bury our head in the sand like an ostrich, pretending that if we don't talk about things and we don't see things, then it's not happening around us. But actually that isn't the case, as I'm sure you guys are aware of from either personal experience or your own lived experience and the experiences of others. So so I just thought that today might just be an opportunity to have a chat amongst ourselves, and just to maybe elucidate others on what the situation is like for people who don't know, and also for people who know as well, not to feel so isolated, to know that they're not alone and that there will be hope, in the future, and hopefully in our lifetimes that we will see a change. Does anyone want to start in terms of their opinions on the subject or any experiences that they've had? I'll pick on someone because I can see all your faces and you're just like, who should go first?
Okay,
yeah,
I'll start.
Yeah.
So I think for me, my medical journey kind of started before, obviously, I started working as an obstetrician trainee. So I can take it back to when I was applying for medicine. And that was an interesting time in itself, because in my school, I was probably one of 3 Black people in the whole school. And I remember when it came to applying, speaking to like the head of sixth form at the time, just about my options and choices. And as every Nigerian applying for uni at that time, I think a lot of parents were like, you should go to Oxbridge. That was the thing, like that's the standard, the gold standard for whatever reason. And I remember saying, oh yeah, these are the universities I wanted to apply to, and the sort of response was why? Like why would you want to go there? Like, why don't you think about other places like Leeds, like Manchester, like Nottingham? And it was almost as though it was a kind of, are you sure you were of the caliber of people that would be attending that kind of university? Can you really do it? And this is after I had worked like incredibly hard to get the grades needed, and I'd gotten like more than the grades needed to get into university at that time. So that, I think, for me was kind of the beginning of like, oh, hold on a second. Okay, there's a bit of a difference here. And then getting into university, I think with med school, it's in itself has its own challenges. Medicine is rigorous, it is intense. And my university wasn't one that had, I would say, a huge population of Black people in medicine. We had our small community, and it was good to have, brotherly, sisterly support, should I say, but it wasn't, again, that we weren't the majority. But I think overall, I would notice that even when it came to preparation, like we would prepare really hard, but then when the outcome and the results were always not comparable. And I don't know, I never understood why. Is it like our studying patterns were wrong, they weren't up to scratch, or what was it that was always making us different compared to our counterparts? And I think also realizing that when you look back, you're like, okay, I know how to diagnose a lot of things in white people. I don't know what that is like in Black people.
Yes.
We did, derm was great. It was the greatest module. It was all pictures. We thank God for that. So we just needed a bit of a break from too much science. And it's nice to see, the red rash, but I'm like, Black people don't get red rashes. It doesn't come up as red just because of the pigment of our skin. So, when you have a rash that is as life-threatening as meningitis, what does that look like in a Black person? When you have Kawasaki disease, what does that look like in a Black person? And I think those are some of the examples of things that makes you realize that, okay, it's not quite equal in terms of everything that we go through and we learn in medical school. And then I think taking it to the workplace, it's been one where I think more so for my patients rather than for myself. So I see that, working in obs and gynae, they've already said, like Black women are more likely to die in childbirth up to 5 times more likely than white people. And that, I think when I think about it, I think how has this come about? What are the things that I see in my day-to-day practice that could explain some of that statistic? And I think for some reason, it just seems like there is a perception, maybe not intentional, maybe it's just been something that, I don't know, it's been passed down somehow. We just seem to assume that Black people have a different level of pain, that if we are reporting a symptom, it's maybe not as serious as we're saying it is. I can think of 2 examples. One was a lady who, this is on the gynae ward, and she's a Black lady, and she had been, she'd come in with a possible ectopic pregnancy. So that's a pregnancy that is occurring in the tubes rather than inside the room. And early hours of the morning, at the end of my night shift, nurses were like, oh yeah, she's just been being very hysterical. She's really odd. I think she needs a psych review. She's just screaming the place down. And like, there's already a bias in that. You're thinking, okay, there's going to be a difficult patient, whatever. And you go review the patient and you're like, she's in a lot of pain. Her observations are not brilliant. She's tachycardic. She's clearly having a ruptured ectopic and she needs to go to theatre. But it's not been highlighted like that. Similarly, I've had a lady who, a couple of hours after his cesarean section, a couple of days after his cesarean section, had been in a lot of pain. This was quite a complex cesarean section. It was the 3rd or 4th cesarean section she'd had now. And I was on, a long day, and I was coming to the end of my shift, and she literally just peered out of her bay where she was, and she was just like, doctor, tears streaming down her eyes, and she's like, can I have a moment to chat with you, please? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Like, what's the matter? Like, geez, she doesn't look in a good state. And she's just like, I'm in so much pain. I've asked for painkillers, they haven't come yet. And I she was talking, I just was like, you really don't look all right. Like, so examine her and everything, and she's basically got quite a bad case of post-op ileus, and she needed a lot of investigations and things doing right there and then. But it just seemed to me that you know, again, she had asked for painkillers and no one had come to review her for a while. And I don't know why that is. I don't know if there is, again, that perception of your pain can't be as bad as you're making it out to be.
Yeah.
So I think for me personally, what I've then realized is when there is a Black patient on my ward, like, I think I take it upon myself to just make sure that I pay a little bit extra attention, just because I know that sometimes, for whatever reason, maybe it's just the staff are busy, or maybe there's just that prejudice that something will happen and they will not be treated in the same way. And I know that already we're, you know, at a risk of worse outcomes, then I would rather try and do my best to make sure that that is averted.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. And you know, it's so funny that was the first thing that you talked about. And I feel as though our listeners might be like, yeah, Mo, but you keep talking about this in the past couple of episodes, but it just happens to be what the issue is. So the reason I say that is the last few episodes we've had have been around. We did one recently with Jadi Sola of Alberts, who's a midwife, and we were talking about why Black women are 5 times more likely to die, and this issue of inappropriate management of pain and symptoms came up. We had Tito Oye, who is a sickle cell champion, and the same issue came up, that Black people have a higher pain threshold, and because she has sickle cell, she should have a higher pain threshold, not getting morphine when she's in crisis, and these kind of things with other people who are in crisis. And it's definitely my lived experience as well, seeing Black women, Black men not being given the right kind of pain relief that they need, or being taken seriously when they're saying something is agonizing. And especially for gynecology has a very horrible history towards Black women that has never been addressed and never been taken seriously. And it's then been perpetuated, and there is racial bias. I don't care if anybody says there's no evidence for that. There is racial bias in gynecology, in obstetrics, absolutely. I mean, one of the fathers of gynecology did all his experiments, Sims did his experiments on Black slaves and didn't give them anesthetic. He repaired vaginal fistulas on Black women and didn't give them anesthetic. And then 400 years later, you're still saying to me that Black women have a higher pain threshold than their Caucasian counterparts. It's nonsense.
Not
it's
right.
Absolutely nonsense. When we had the midwife podcast, I put a poll up on my page. And I do that every time we have a podcast, so that we just get people understanding what the episode is about. We do a couple of quizzes and then we lead them on into the podcast. And I put up, do Black women have a higher pain threshold than non-Black women? The people that answered true were doctors, non-Black doctors.
Interesting.
And so now it's very clear, because I can see who has voted and I can check your page out. Now, you might not know that you've got a racial bias, but that is a racial bias.
Yep.
We don't have a higher pain threshold. We don't have non-sensitive pain fibers. Pain-gated theory is not of a different theory in us than of other women. You know,
not really.
It really isn't. And so this whole thing of you're a strong Black woman and so you should endure pain more is wrong.
It's ridiculous, yeah.
It is wrong, and it definitely goes on in the rest of medicine, in then, you know, training other people, training other midwives, training other doctors to have that bias. And I think sometimes as well, even as Black doctors, being trained in an environment that has that bias, sometimes we might actually trap ourselves into thinking that way as well.
Yeah.
If we are not, I don't know what the word would be, but woke, I suppose, if we're not enlightened, if we're not aware.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can really fall into that rabbit hole of thinking, oh yeah, but you're a Black woman, and you know, we've all done it. You know, we've all, you know, endured extra pain than we're supposed to do in our periods, and we all have fibroids, and we're all bleeding heavily, we're all flooding. You know, we're all doing this, and sometimes we do it to ourselves as well. And we don't know that we're doing it to ourselves. We just say, oh yeah, well, everybody in my family has endometriosis, so I probably have endometriosis. I'm going to suffer. But no, you shouldn't be in that situation. You shouldn't. And I think that is, this whole thing with the protests, it's just bringing a lot of things to the fore in terms of how sometimes we have treated ourselves, but actually how society has treated us for such a long time in a way that has been designed to oppress us, and in a way that has been designed to also then perpetuate negative health outcomes, because there is no scientific reason why Black women should be dying at the rates that they should.
Nothing at all. Nothing to support that.
Yes, so there is no scientific reason. There's nothing in our root. There's just nothing. There's nothing that should give us the kind of health outcomes that we're getting when we're just trying to have our babies. And so we need to sit down and actually say, well, what is actually
what's going on?
What is actually going on? When I press that buzzer, is my midwife coming? When I speak to the doctor, is the doctor coming? When I have preeclampsia, what are they doing about it? When my blood pressure is high, what are they doing about it? When my sugars are high, is my HbA1c being treated more aggressively, just as aggressively as my Caucasian counterpart in this exact situation? When there's abuse in the home, do they care about me and my babies as much as they do for my Caucasian counterpart who is in the exact same kind of situation with domestic violence? And it's those kind of discussions that we really need to have, and an in-depth analysis into what is going on, because they keep bringing out all these reports and saying, oh yeah, so it's the same. But what have we done about it? What have we done about it? And then coming back into sort of in the workplace as a Black female doctor, Timmy, do you have anything to say about sort of your encounters with colleagues, or the microaggressions that come through in healthcare? I was told once when I was an F1 by one of my consultants, I had faux locks, and she looked at me and she was like, why do you have this kind of hairstyle? And I mean, it was a Friday, I wasn't working the weekend, I took it out. By Monday, I'd done like crochet twists, and I was like, you know what? So and she looked at me and she was like, this is better. When she saw me on the Monday morning.
Wow.
And I mean, I was an F1. What was I gonna do? Like,
that's the thing.
It's that kind of thing, isn't it? So tell me, over to you. Let us know.
Well, I think the number one comment that I think we all experience, no matter how many times you introduce yourself to a patient, no matter how long and how much detailed information you give them, you always leave the conversation with, thank you, nurse. Thank you so much, nurse, for what you've done. I really 100%. Appreciate it. It doesn't matter if you have a big, I remember when I was working in A&E, we used to wear scrubs, and our scrubs used to have a big logo that said doctor on it. And it doesn't matter if you're like, hi, I'm Dr. this, blah, 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 blah. I think your child is this, this, and this. They don't respect the fact that you're a doctor. Even sometimes I'll never forget the day I spent extra time trying to explain things to this family. They were a white family, about what was going on with their child. And I introduced myself, as I always do, spent ages dealing with the situation at hand, and then sent them away. And the mum came back shouting, saying, how dare you send my child back without being seen by a doctor? How dare you send my child, only a nurse has dealt with her, and now you're sending her home. I came to A&E because I thought she needed to be seen by a doctor. I was the only doctor on duty that day. And she was shouting at the white nurse who was, the head of department. So the white nurse just came over and said, oh, Temi, did you not see this family? I was like, yeah, I spoke to them. I spoke to the mum, I spoke to the child. I gave them the plan and everything like that. And then the woman, she looked mortified, and she was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it like that. I didn't realize you were a doctor. Maybe I didn't quite hear what you were saying. And, in the middle of a busy night shift, you don't have the energy to deal with that. You're like, no, don't worry, it's fine. Just go and deal with it. But you go back and you think to yourself, and you're like, I introduced myself to you. I have a big label on my scrub that says doctor on it, as well as my badge that says doctor around it. But just because of the way I look to you, for some reason, especially being a Black woman, you don't feel that I should have that kind of position in healthcare, or I should have some sort of authority to be able to tell you how to deal with your child and treat your child without getting a second opinion from someone else. And I think that was in my my F2 year that I experienced that, and it was something that I just had to sort of, you know, it's upsetting, but it's something you get over, you learn to deal with, and you're like, okay, just get used to it. You know, there's no support for things like this. It's kind of like, well, what do you expect? Why are you surprised? You should know this by now. You should know, you know, as a Black female doctor, you're always going to be called nurse. Don't take offense from it. It's just something people do. You know, it's not their fault. It's their age. It's the society they come from. So that's something that I don't think any female doctor has not experienced. I'll be surprised to come across a female Black doctor that has never been called a nurse. To the extent even a male white nurse can come over and he's a doctor automatically, but well, you know, it doesn't matter.
Honestly.
And they'll rather listen to him because he's the white doctor and you're the Black nurse, even though the roles are reversed. So that's something that happens a lot from, I guess, patient interactions. And also when you look at the structure of healthcare as a whole, you look at it when you're look around any hospital, any place you work in, you know, most of the nurses are people of color, most of the junior doctors are people of color, and the higher you go up the hierarchy, the whiter it gets. You know, the head consultants, the head of departments, you might have one or two Black or Asian doctors that are, you know, head of departments, but the majority of them seem to be Caucasian. When you go to chief executives and the higher ups and the whatever sort of executives, it gets whiter and whiter and whiter, and your voice gets lost, unfortunately. And it's one of the things you just learn to band together with your colleagues that look like you. And you know Black people, a lot of the time we deal with our frustrations by turning it into a joke or making it funny so we can deal with how we actually feel. So, you know, you just have a few of you that will meet up at lunchtime. Oh, can you imagine what happened here? Do you know what so-and-so said? Just to sort of air out the frustrations you have. But in a reality, it shouldn't be like that. I don't think if a white doctor, a white female doctor encountered some of the interactions we do with patients and they raise it, something often happens. There's always, you know, a big response. Whereas with us, it's kind of, we're told to like, why are you making a fuss? Just keep quiet, you know? And I think a lot of that comes from the mentality of, you know, our parents and the generations before us. A lot of them felt like, you know, we're just fortunate to be in this situation. Let's not, you know, ruffle too many feathers. Let's not step on anyone's toes. If they're a little bit racist, don't worry. You know you're good. You know you're Black. You know you're this. It doesn't matter what they think. You know who you are. So you walk around and you work with that kind of mentality. So if someone does something or says something that you know is not right, in your mind you're like, anyway, they probably didn't know what they meant by that. You know, let me not cause any trouble. We don't want it to drag on. We'll brush it under the carpet. Whereas a lot of our counterparts from different backgrounds, they don't feel like that. So they can voice out quite easily, you know, the same way you mentioned about your hair. If that was a white lady that maybe dyed her hair a different color, I don't think any consultant will say anything about that, because that will be seen as being, you know, discriminating against someone. There's no rules in our whatever we sign in our contracts that say you must have one type of hair. I don't remember signing that anywhere. But you know, our other counterparts can come in with different color hair, different this, different that, and nothing is said. It's seen as an expression of yourself. Exactly. But if we do the same, it's always met with some sort of remark of, oh, that, you know, that I don't, if it's, oh, that hair looks different, I prefer your other hair, or oh, why did you do that, or can I touch it, is it real, how do you do this, how do you do that? And it's like, to the extent sometimes you're like, oh, I'm not going to bother changing my hair, let me just have the same hair that I go to work with all the time to avoid this whole conversation about my appearance. But my friend next to me could do the same thing, and it doesn't seem to ruffle any feathers. No one cares. And I think it's just crazy. There's so many, you know, microaggressions that we face, and I think what's happened recently has really brought it to the surface. I think we spend a lot of time suppressing how we feel, or suppressing, or being in denial about, you know, oh, you know, that's not right. You know, we spend a lot of time making excuses for people, you know, just trying to find a reason to explain why someone has behaved that way. You know, we never want to call someone racist. We never want to make someone feel bad. We always try and embrace and make people feel good. So if I know that, oh, if I tell this person off, it might offend her, let me just keep quiet. It doesn't matter. And it's something that I think we have a lot of unlearning to do. Yeah. It's something that we need to change in ourselves as well, so that if we stand up for ourselves and correct them and say enough times, you know, this is not correct, you can't talk to me like this. No, I'm not your nurse, I'm your doctor. I've told you before. You know, just because sometimes, I won't lie, a few times I've accepted it. I can't be bothered to keep introducing myself. So if you call me a nurse, I'll be like, yes, even though I know I'm not a nurse. But why should I do that? Why should I just make your life easier by accepting a title that is not my title, a role that is not my role? Not that there's anything wrong with being a nurse. There's, you know, amazing nurses, but I'm just not one of them. And I think that's something that we have to voice out a lot more, and hopefully that will make some sort of a change as well.
And the thing is, Black women, I think we're always trying to censor ourselves in the workplace so much by the way we express ourselves, and we're trying not to be as loud as we might be at home, because it's going to be seen a certain way. And when we're speaking clearly, we're seen as aggressive. When we're being assertive, we're seen as aggressive. And it's all these kind of things where I can't say something clearly the same way a Caucasian female would say it clearly. I have to add in extra padding words to make it seem a lot sweeter, when, I'm sorry, that's just a waste of time. I'm not trying.
Do you know what? That's a really interesting point. I was going to add something to like what you both said there, because I think when I was looking into the word equality, like one of the words that came up was freedom. And I think when we go back to everything that's happened with George Floyd, it's about that whole thing of I can't breathe. And I think many of us are not breathing in our workplaces. And if you think about it, like there is, like you said, like Tammy was saying, there's no reason why we can't be free to be ourselves. But I know for a fact, like I always, like I feel like now some of the people I work with are stakeholders in my hair, because that will always be like, oh no, we like that style better, can you go back to the style you did? And I'm just like, wow, like I actually need to, sorry, I didn't realize I need to take permission to like change my hair. And like, even though it's well known, yes, my hair will not fit one theta cap, but that's fine. I still get it covered, but it will still get a comment. And I'm like, but it's covered, but what else do you want me to do? I don't have straight hair. I won't have that. Like, that's not how my hair is. But there will still be a comment. And I think going back to the point of introductions, I think sometimes, in as much as, you know, for all you care, your name could be Sarah, but because you're Black, all of a sudden it's like, oh, I didn't catch that. Or if you say it with an accent, even worse, it's just like, oh yeah, they had some kind of foreign name. And I'm like, it's Sarah. Like, it's not anything that, you know, overly complicated. But then I think because you look different and you sound different, automatically there's like a struggle with it all of a sudden. And I think what you said about kind of being looked at as the nurse, sometimes being looked at as the cleaner, which is just like, okay, that's the level that you want to, you know, appropriate me, right? And I don't know, for a long time, I think, like we've highlighted, sometimes we've grown up with the culture of, it's almost like we are thankful, we're very grateful to be in this position. You know, we've our generations before us haven't made it this far, none that we have. Like, definitely let's be more hush hush. We don't want to say too much that will make us lose our place, as it were. But then I think that now, with everything going on, then it's time for us to kind of take a stand and say it's not okay. I'll share like an experience of a friend of mine, and she is working in psych at the moment. And it's one of those ones where, yes, you know, patients, they've got an illness and that's why they're in the hospital. But then being called like a black, insert unpleasant word, is not okay. And sometimes even with non-mental health patients, like you will get that just because you're black. And it's saying, because I think what she was able to do was just to kind of say, look, I don't come to work to be disrespected. Like, I don't need to be spoken to like this. And like, thankfully, the patient, I think, kind of realized, and like the next time she was in, was able to apologize. But I think it's things like that, like not even being rude or being aggressive or being violent, but just saying like, I am a person too. I don't need to be spoken to in a way that is demeaning, because like I am equally human as you are. I deserve life. Like I deserve to breathe, as we've said. I deserve to be free and to be me. And like I've not done anything to you to make you speak to me like this or to make you attack me like this. There's no reason for it at all. But I think we do need to be our own voice, definitely, in the workplace.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I really agree with you. And in terms of that not being able to breathe, it goes through so many, it just cuts through so many areas because, you know, I had a patient say to me once, and I mean, she was grateful. So it was, you know, I'd seen her, she'd come in with her daughter, and then as they were leaving, they were, you know, they were really thankful. Oh, you're such a nice doctor, blah blah blah. You know, you're so young to be a doctor. I'm actually not. Just fine. Like, okay, thank you. You know, okay. And then she was like, oh, you know, you have such great skin. And then she was like, people of your from your country have
people of your country.
And I was just like, oh dear. And you know, I think the thing is, and it was that kind of thing where I kind of felt sorry for her because throughout the consultation and everything and all my encounters with her and the family, they were all really polite, and it wasn't, you know, and so I think she felt comfortable to pay me a compliment, but she didn't know how to pay me a compliment. And then she realized that she was taking it racial when it really didn't need to be. All she needed to say was, you're so young and you're so lovely and you have really nice skin. And I would have taken it that. And you know, people saying you're so young to be a doctor, I'm kind of used to it now. It's all, you know, it's an ageist thing, but that's okay. But you know, but then the race thing came into it, and then she felt awkward. You know. And so I think the problem is also because we have this culture in England of not talking about things. People don't know how to actually address things and say things. And there's nothing wrong with you saying that I'm a pretty girl with nice skin. There's nothing wrong with that. But people just don't know how to do that. And that's also because we also don't talk about it enough. And there's just no conversations available for them to know how to express these things, because there's nothing wrong with paying someone a compliment.
Definitely,
and so those kind of things. And you know, I was listening to Life After the Letters, and they were talking to Mr. Selu, who was sent to prison for manslaughter a few years ago, when actually he hadn't done anything wrong for the patient he'd operated on. There was a lot of systemic issues in the private hospital that he was working at. His conviction got overturned and all of that. And we were just, you know, they were talking about how we know that referrals to the GMC are disproportionately high in members of the BAME community, and especially Black doctors, and they are referred by their organizations to the GMC at a ridiculous rate for things. Let's not even go into the ridiculous, like, it's just, And so these are the kind of things that we're always aware of as well in our heads. So medicine is already very litigious, but then you also remember that you're a Black person. And in terms of everything that you're doing, and in terms of work, and in terms of that as well. How has that affected you in terms of how you practice medicine? Just being aware of that. or also just being aware of how maybe your colleagues perceive you as well in the workplace. Because I was speaking to a gynae consultant she's based in London, and she's one of the clinical directors at one of the huge trusts in London. And she did an episode like this on a podcast for her church based on race. And afterwards, she said to me, she said, Dami, I actually felt a bit awkward. I thought, if my bosses at work or the board members listen to it, am I going to fall out of favor? And I was looking at her and I'm like, oh my God, I'm looking at you as a woman who has made it to the table and is encouraging the rest of us coming along, and you're still having these exact same thoughts, and these things are hindering you. So imagine she's spoken freely on the podcast, but she's also probably censored herself.
And I think it's crazy. The funny thing is with me, I had my experience with the GMC very early. Not that I did anything wrong or anything like that, but when I qualified from uni, my university didn't put my middle names on my certificate, just because I went by my first name and my last name, and they were like, okay, that should be fine enough. So after I did all my exams, did my PLAB and everything, and qualified, to get my GMC registration, it was a battle. It took me, so I finished my exams and everything beginning of December, and I didn't get my GMC registration till April. So I'd gone back to my university, got them to sign paperwork to say that, look, I'm the same person, this, and this. Then they wanted all my transcripts again, and they just, every time I'd give them what they want, they'll come back with something else they need. And what ended up getting me the my registration in the end, I think I just got so frustrated, and I just had to write. It was one, you deal with one particular person who looks at your case, and my one happened to be a white man, and I feel that has something to do with why it took so long to deal with. I went down to the GMC building. I went over out of my way. I flew back to the Ukraine to try and sort out things as well. They were in the middle of their war at the time as well, not exactly in the city I was working in. And I had to write them an email saying, I've sent you everything you want. I've given you every piece of document you want as soon as you requested for it. What else do you want me to do? Do you not understand this country is in the middle of a war? Do you think them sorting out my issues is of paramount importance to them at this moment in time? What else do you want from me? Then the next day you get an email, your GMC registration has been granted.
Wow.
So it took to that point of when you have to say, look, I know everything, I've done what you want. What else do you want? What else do you, can you provide? And it's a shame, because the only thing that we're missing were two middle names that I don't even use, that just happened to be on my birth certificate. And I gave them documents from my university, I think straight away when they asked for it, saying that, look, this person, is the same person. We've got her registered as both things, sealed from the dean of the university and all that kind of stuff, on official letterhead, everything. I don't know what else they could have wanted. It's like, he was like, okay, I'm going to dig into everything. I want your last year's, your final year's transcripts. And the issue that annoyed me and why I had to speak up is because he wanted me to get something in writing for every professor of my last year of medical school.
What?
Go and find, that's what they asked me for. Finally, the thing that made me say, these people are in the middle of this. Do you think me reaching out to every person that taught me in my final year of medical school is going to go anywhere?
How is every professor even going to know you in your
That's the thing. They're not just teaching just you.
It's any year of medical school. If you went to a large medical school with 340 students per year, how is every professor? Some of them don't even mark the exam papers. What are we talking about?
That's so not that's not possible.
So that's what. And then after I spoke out or emailed out in frustration, obviously as politely as you can, because you need the registration. Then I got the registration, and that's the day I knew that before these high profile cases came out, I'm like, these people don't care. That made me know that from that day I have to be careful, because if they're giving me this much stress to get something I'm entitled to, because I passed your exams. It's not that I didn't pass your exams. I passed your exams, even down to doing the IELTS exam, which I had to I asked them about, why am I doing IELTS? I was born here, I did my GCSEs and everything here. Why am I doing an exam to test the only language I can speak fluently? But that still wasn't enough for them. I went to do the exam. So I did everything you asked me to do, and you're still giving me headache. So that lets me know that if it's that hard to get on this list, it must be really easy to get kicked off. So from that day, I was like, okay, it's not an even playing field. It's not the same like hymn sheet we're all singing from. So I have to be careful, and it's something that whenever anyone asks me about, oh, how was it? How was this? How was that? I always make sure I tell people that, look, it's not the same game we're playing, and we have to be very careful, because it seems like they don't want us on the list, and even when we are, it's really easy to get off it.
Yeah, I would say, like, in addition to that, like, coming at it from a slightly different angle, we definitely not only have to be careful, we have to work harder. So, and I think that when you are in medicine, and when you are working in whatever field you're working in, like, it's then a bit of a disappointment and a bit of a shame, really, when like some of us are not then like playing our part. So because sometimes the way that people are responding to you is not just because of your race. Like, let's face it, sometimes you can always be late, and you're fitting that typical Black people are always late. You can really, like, truly not know your stuff and not keep your skills up to date. And then that's not a thing of race. That's just a thing of, okay, you're really not playing your part in this. And I think that spinning it on its head really is, as we have to work hard for that reason. Like, we can't afford to slack, because then it will just be, you fit the stereotype. And therefore, like you said, it's then easy to just kick you off, because, well, Black people are lazy anyway. But that's not what it's supposed to be, because if you're here, you've clearly worked hard, you've got the capacity. So if you are in this playing field, then you are able, but you have to keep that up. And fair enough, some of our counterparts might not have to work as hard, but I think there is that awareness that you as a Black person, that's what you have to do to remain on the table.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously you definitely have to work twice as hard, sometimes 3 times as hard. And I think, in that situation, when I also called out that consultant, I knew. I said to him, I said, like, do you have any issues with my work? I was like, oh, no, you don't know. And I was like, well, I know. So so I know. So what's your issue? The only issue here is you don't like my face, and my face is Black. That is your issue. And I think sometimes we're able to do that when we know where we're at in terms of, because if you had felt that, oh, maybe you're not so, and sometimes we felt that some of us have done rotations where we're just meandering through and just trying to keep our head above water, and that is fine, because it is training. And so, sometimes you're the one that is going to help other people, you're the one that is going to stay a bit longer to help the person that is coming on shift, just to help clear things up for them, or you're the one that's going to do most of the discharge letters and do a lot of the work, and things like that. And I remember I had one consultant on a day that I was supposed to be doing letters, and he said she was looking for me. And I went to her and I was like, what do you want? And she said, oh, there's a pile of discharge letters. I said, you mean the ones I've done? And she was like, oh, well, I said, what did they say? Because they keep calling me that you want me. You're not the one in charge of me. You're on call for something else, but you're calling me about a pile of discharge letters that I have done. What do you want? And so sometimes it's that kind of confrontation, and not necessarily confrontation, but sometimes you need to stand up to be able to say, you're accusing me of something that I haven't done. And if you think that you have evidence that I've done something wrong, show me what the problem is, because you're lying against me. And sometimes some of our colleagues have been in those kind of situations where people have said things about them that haven't been true, and they've not necessarily been able to actually confront the situation, or they've let it go. And a lot of us have done that. We just let it go. Somebody says something, we let it go. I remember we were all at dinner once in med school, and one of the girls in our group, her boyfriend said to me, "Oh yeah, well, Black people have harsher features anyway." And I didn't even know what
Really?
I was just like, okay, like, yeah, sure, like, we have harsh features. Like, what am I gonna do? Like,
What can you do about that?
you know? And I'm like, well, where does this come from that our features are harsh? Who gives, who says these things, and who teaches people these things? But actually, coming to you, Timmy, you went to med school in the Ukraine. What was race like there?
It was a very different experience, I'd say. Obviously, here everything is very, covert and hush hush, and you get the stares, but you won't even really get the stares. People kind of look at you, quick glance. But the city I was in Ukraine wasn't like a capital city or a huge city. It was quite small, quite remote. But the difference was the medical school was very, very diverse. So you had the Ukrainian students that learn in, Russian, and then the people learning in English were all African from Africa, or Asian from Asia, sort of Indian, but mainly Indian and Nigerian were the two major cultures or people that were there. So so in my class, for example, there were 10 of us or 12 or something, and maybe 4 of us were Black and the rest were Asian. So it wasn't like you were interacting every day with the Ukrainians, and then you'd stay on campus or not too far, and you'd live with Nigerians or whoever you chose to live with. It was, I guess, when you left those kind of environments, maybe if you're going to the supermarket, or if you're going to the market, or you're going somewhere, that's when you remember that, okay, yes, I'm not in uni, I'm not in my safe haven anymore. As a girl, I think the sort of harsh racism, like, oh, you're a monkey, you're this, you're that, wasn't what we experienced a lot of. A lot of it was more, I guess, we were exotic. Ooh, Black women, we've never seen Black women before. It's that kind of like, ooh, I'll never forget the day someone was a Ukrainian guy walked past me in the street, and in Russian he basically said, "Oh, chocolate and milk go very well together." That kind of sort of sexual kind of, in a way, like, we don't have many of these. Let's see what it's like. I want to experience what they're like. But not so. I was never called a monkey, for example, but I saw the way they did treat the Asian boys and the Black boys, in terms of sometimes they got attacked. If they saw them with the Ukrainian girls walking outside, they could get attacked because you're stealing our women. What is this person doing with our people? Whereas they all wanted to sexualize us. They all wanted to experience us if they could, It's something different. We're like I don't know, commodity, and it's kind of similar to what happened in the slavery days as well, isn't it? The Black man can't touch a white anything, but all the white slave masters wanted to experience
take all the Black women
different. And it was like that. In terms of, all our lecturers were Ukrainian, but I don't recall any of them being overtly or even covertly racist, to be honest, in terms of the people that taught us. But the people that taught us, most of them could speak English and maybe had been abroad or something before, or attended online lectures from Harvard and different people. So I feel like maybe they were a bit more exposed to to people of different cultures. Yeah, but definitely on walking the streets, you'll be reminded that you are other, if it's either by being looked at like, oh, what's that? Or I will never forget one of my friends. He was on the bus and he came back and he told us this story, and there was a little no, it wasn't even, I think it happened once with a little girl and once with an older Ukrainian woman, and they just came up to him on the bus and just wiped his skin like that. to see if maybe he's dirty or if the black will come off or something like that. You know, just and looking at their hand, or you know, they'll be like, "Mum, why is he dark like the sky, or why is he black like the dirt?" Or something like that. And you know, they will either tell their kids don't say that, or they'll say, "Oh, because he's naughty," or something like that. But it was very interesting to see that a lot of these people just had no concept of what black is, or black people, or Asians, or anything like that. It was just so foreign to them. It's like all of us just came to uni into their little village and really opened their eyes to, you know, the world isn't white. there's other spectrums of color. But things like that, I remember when I first got to Ukraine, my dad came with me. He spent about 2-3 weeks with me there, just to make sure it was okay and safe, and that it's the right decision we decided to make. And we went to, I had braids, single plaits, because I was like, well, I'm going away for a while. I don't know what I'm going to do about my hair. Let me do something that's going to last a while. And I remember in the market and just feeling my hair being tugged, and I looked at the back, and you know, they're marveling at, what is this stuff? And I was just like, where have I gone? That someone has at least here they will look and ask, can I touch? This one, you're walking and your head's yanked back.
Somebody's actually pulling it. Wow.
They've made that choice to touch your hair without your permission. So not little things, but things like that was interesting, but also a lot of them were curious and they were open to learn. I made some really, you know, lifelong Ukrainian friends, and some of them, it was just genuine curiosity because they haven't been exposed to many black people. I get the wealthier ones, because they do have quite a big difference between, you know, the wealthy and the poor. So the poor ones might not have had access to TV as such, to develop some of the prejudices that you know, you get from watching TV about black people. So those kind of people were really intrigued to learn about you. So that was refreshing, in a way that you get to impact someone and make them have a genuine idea of what black people are, not watching, you know, a movie or a TV show where every villain is black, every bad person is black, every drug dealer is black, every negative thing has to be black. You know, at least for them, you could teach them and let them know that, you know, we're just people like you know, there's nothing besides my skin color being different. That's about it. It's pretty much boring after that. It's the same thing. So I think that was one of the most refreshing experiences in that aspect, getting to actually show people with your behavior and your personality that, you know, there's so many different types of black people, and we're not all some bad guy on whatever TV show is popular at the time.
And I think definitely media portrayal in the media, social media, the way that portrayed definitely plays a role in it. You know, when Michelle Obama started with the campaign, everything was about how she was an angry black woman, and once you get a woman in a position of power, it's that thing of trying to turn her into this angry black woman. If she's assertive, she's aggressive, you know, anything, or to try to sexualize our bodies, just anything to try to bring us down or demean us. It's something that definitely needs a lot of work. If you were to speak to, you know, a teenage girl who was thinking of going into medicine, or someone in, you know, because we're all sort of, you know, further along in our careers now than perhaps we were 10 years ago, when, you know, 10 years ago, we were all probably just starting out in med school, weren't we? You know, actually thinking about it, we're also that age.
Thinking about it,
So, you know, your sort of self 10 years ago, you know, whether you're probably in second year of med school or just getting in, you've had a couple of gap years getting into med school, and just what would you say to her in terms of race?
Gosh, it's hard to kind of think as to what I would say to myself way back. I think, like a lot of us at the time, one of the things that, well, I went into uni thinking was that, you know, I wanted to learn about other people. I wanted to learn about other cultures, and I'd say definitely be open-minded don't be closed-minded, and where you have the opportunity to interact with other people from different backgrounds, use that as a, use that as an opportunity as well to educate them. I think, like you've alluded to, Black is absolutely human. It is what you have, it is who you are, and that's not going to change. So fully embrace it and be free to be who you are. Sorry, this is digressing a little bit, but I remember, like, just the story you shared, tell me about somebody coming to kind of like wipe off. Like, I remember a lady saying to me, I was doing like a GP rotation, and she was like, "Oh, I really like your tan." And I'm thinking, wow, this tan is very permanent. Yep, it's a permanent tan. But gosh, like, definitely, if I was to advise myself, like, be comfortable in your own skin because it's permanent. But I think it's key as a young Black woman in medicine to know that there isn't anything that is off limits because of your skin color. Like, there isn't anything that you can't achieve. So whatever it is that you need to, communicate with people, talk to people, get to know the system, get to know how other people do it. Because I was reading something by one of the consultant urologists. It was featured in the BMJ, in the Buts, and I think he was saying that it took him a long time to be able to kind of have a drink with some of his seniors, to be able to rub shoulders with them, just because he just felt they were outside his world. Like, there was this disconnect. He couldn't connect. And I would say that don't shy away from mingling. Don't feel like it has to be them and us. Like, invite yourself to the table. Invite yourself to the table.
Definitely.
I think, definitely about people as well. I think we often have imposter syndrome. We definitely struggle with that in terms of not just and maybe sometimes as a woman, and then also as a Black woman in health as well. Definitely. Timmy, what would you say to yourself 10 years ago?
I would have said to myself, don't allow anyone to pigeonhole you or put you in a category. So before I went to Ukraine, obviously I was here, and when I was doing my A-levels, and I've always known I wanted to do medicine since no one pushed me into, I'm not a traditional, oh, you must be a doctor, lawyer, whatever. I chose it. I was like, whenever I'd go to my GP, I was fascinated. If I ended up in the Peds hospital, I was fascinated. I thought it was such a fun place to work because, it was aimed at kids. So I always wanted to do it. And when I was doing my A-levels, they called us all into a room and they're like, oh, anyone that wants to pursue careers in, medicine, pharmacy, blah, 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 here's what you should do. I remember them telling me that, don't bother pursuing medicine, you won't get in. There's no point. Do something like pharmacy. Pharmacy would suit you better. You'll get into that, no problem. And unfortunately, at that time, I had a lot of older cousins that got all the grades you needed, all the A stars, all the A's in everything. They still just didn't get into medical school. So my reality, what I was seeing is that if they're not getting in and they are brilliant, and my people at school are telling me to pursue pharmacy, then I'm going to be a pharmacist. It's not quite what I wanted to do. It's not quite my dream, but let me just settle for what I'm good enough for. And I'm so grateful to my parents, especially my dad. He was kind of like, no, you want to be a doctor, you're going to be a doctor. And he's the one that did the research and found the university, and that's how I ended up doing what I wanted to do. So if I didn't have support from my family, I could have well been a pharmacist. And there's nothing wrong with being a pharmacist. My sister's a pharmacist, but that just wasn't the dream I had in me. And if I'd allowed, what other people told me I'm good enough for, and it wasn't, I don't even think it was down to grades at that time, because it was just, when you start your AS journey and, you tell them what you want to do, and then just from there and then they're like, no. There was a few of us actually that they told. I think someone wanted to be a dentist, and they're like, probably do pharmacy. You know, pharmacy is probably better suited for you guys. And you know, it's a sad fact that sometimes you have to be your own champion, and you are the only one that knows what you are truly capable of. All this, you know, oh, you don't put enough effort in, you don't do all that kind of thing. No one knows how much effort you put in. No one knows if you stayed up all night cramming whatever you read, or you spend all your weekends doing whatever you do. Nobody knows. So you're the only one that knows how much more you can give, or how much more you can't give. So listen to your internal voice. I think that's something I had to learn as I started progressing through medical school and, you know, working, that your own internal voice is very valid, and sometimes is more valid than the external voices that you hear around you every day. So that's probably what I'll tell myself.
Yeah, definitely. I love that. And it's you know, it's so interesting that all three of us have had that kind of experience in terms of career counselors at school saying certain things to us, or, you know, just don't bother applying to that medical school. You're not going to get in. Yeah. You know, this kind of thing and that kind of thing. And I think at the time, I was like, oh, well, thank you for telling me that I won't get into that one. I'll apply to this one instead. And you know, that sort of thing. And when I finally got into my choices, it was like, oh my God, I got in. But thinking back on it now, it was like, but why? But I had the grades. And so
never asked.
So I'm like,
never ask, we just accept.
I just accepted it. I just thought, oh, she's just had a look at my maybe personal statement or whatever. She's just being honest and, you know, open, and it's private school, so she's, you know, she's probably doing her job. But now I'm thinking about it, I'm like, hold on a minute, but I had the grades. So I had the work experience. So thinking about it in reflection, I'm like, what was she talking about?
Like, what else do you need? I feel like ticked all the boxes already.
And I'm like, the only thing that I didn't have was less melanin. But we're here, we're where we are today.
It's a permanent tan.
Permanent tan. You know, we're where we are today, and hopefully we'll just be able to encourage the generation coming up as well, to, you know, to have that faith. As you know, Jem said, to believe that, you know, your race is not a limiting factor, and as Timmy said as well, external factors are not what should affect you, but your own resilience and willingness to pursue your dreams. So thank you so much for coming on today, guys.
Thank you for having us.
We could continue.
It's been so much fun.
Longer, but we have to cut it short at some point. But thank you so much. It's been a great chat. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode. Do share this podcast with 2 people who have not heard about us before. Remember that this podcast in no way replaces advice from your own doctor or physician. Do subscribe and follow us on social media. Leave us a review on iTunes so that others can access the amazing content. And do join the club at asliceofhealth.club and drop us some suggestions or questions that you might have. Don't forget to be a health champion wherever you go by separating health fact from health fiction.